Enrica Rodriguez, whose current project at CAR is on the demography of British Mandate Palestine and the analysis of Zionist settler colonialism, its effects on indigenous populations, and the redesign of population sources through digital humanities. Dr. Rodriguez holds a PhD in Palestine Studies from the University of Exeter. He specializes in settler colonialism and demography during the Mandate period in Palestine. His research offers a new perspective and examines the British Mandate through the British Mandate period through the lens of the settler colonial paradigm and digital humanities. Dr. Rodriguez argues that the Mandate period was a key moment for the Zionist movement in which the foundations were laid for the settler colonial project of Zionism in Palestine. We at CA are very happy to have him at AB and are sure of the great work and impact he will leave behind. Please join me in welcoming Enrica to talk.
Thank you, Rita, for hosting me. As you said, this workshop is going to be a workshop or seminar is going to be about the demographics of the British Mandate period and how I use them through digital humanities. As you mentioned before, I hold a BA in History and Journalism by the Basque University in the Basque Country. And then I moved to Exeter where I did an MA on Middle Eastern History and where I did as well a PhD on Palestine Studies, where the title of the thesis was Settled Colonial Demographics, a study of the consequences of Zionist land purchases and immigration during the British Mandate in Palestine. I analyzed 4 sub-districts during the thesis, during the PhD. 2 of them they were Haifa and Nazareth, with a large number of land purchases and immigration, and another 2 of them they were Jenin and Nablus, where they were showing another kind of patterns related to population development. My interest lies on different kind of fields. It's merging demography, history, settled colonial theories. That's a quite new field, and as well, recently, for my thesis, I stepped into digital humanities. That it's an emerging field that is being covered by different faculties, different institutions, and brings new tools for the humanities to allow us to have more impact and to develop the research in through another tools. There's something wrong with the computer, but I don't know where it's it. Anyway, I can work without it in case. So the main things that are going to be talked in the workshop, even it doesn't appear there. It's here. There are demography, settled colonialism, history of the Mandate Palestine, and digital humanities. I don't know what kind of interest do you have related to the workshop. So we could change, or we could manage the workshop in one direction, in the other, or the lecture in one direction, in the other, depending the needs or the willingness of the people to work with. At the end, I was thinking on if people want as well, we could use one of the software that I work with. This QEIS is related to geographical information system to show how I implement demography and in this case geography to the project and to the Palestinian field in terms of demography. It's going well. I will keep on talking. So basically, I have I divided the workshop of the lecture in let's say in 5 different themes. As I said, it will be a brief introduction that I will talk about in a general way how and why I deal with this project. Then I would like to jump to a more, let's say, broad idea of digital humanities, how I use them, how I work with them, and as well to the theory of settled colonialism, because I don't know how familiar you are framing the case study of Israel inside the settled colonial paradigm. As well, it would be helpful to talk about briefly about the Palestinian history and demography is framing as well inside the mandate period and the demographic development, not only in Palestine but in a more general perspective. The demographics of Palestine. And finally, I mean, as I said, I mean, we could go more in detail maybe with the type of software or what kind of the procedures that I have behind me, all the procedures that I follow for the project related to changing maps, reshaping the boundaries, and so on. And we could end up, I mean, if you like to, I mean, with a more interactive process of working with the software or showing how the process could be carried out, mapping and adding information, making visual the type of data that you work with, and so on. So, as I said, I mean, I came here, I mean, to work on a project of digital humanities, mandate British Palestine, demography, and settled colonialism. We know, I mean, I would say like 20 years ago, it started at this, maybe earlier, but I mean, it's taking a big step in academia. This theory of settled colonialism, and it's where I frame my study. I mean, I could argue that, I mean, as we know, I mean, the Nakba was a disaster for the Palestinians in 47, 48, 49. I mean, during the war, where half of the population was expelled. But I mean, if you go through the literature and you analyze the demographic needs of not only the Israeli settled colonial project, the Zionist settled colonial project, but other settled colonial case studies that could be like, for example, South Africa or Australia or United States of America, you will see different patterns in terms of demography. When I step into the case study, I mean, I realized, not only me but other scholars as well, that I mean that if it is true that I mean in the Nakba it was a large change of the demographic balance and demographic picture on the ground in Palestine, I mean the process itself started even before. I mean the mindset or the ideology of the need of becoming like a demographic majority or just the only demographic group on the ground is nothing that stepped into the frame in 1947-49. I mean, it was something that was coming even before. I mean, if we analyze the different discourses, letters of the Zionist leaders, and we will come across some of the ideas of denying the existence of the Palestinian population. The connection between the Arabs and what was the British mandate Palestine, and so on. So I thought, I mean, seeing that and thinking on that, I mean, I said, okay, I mean, we knew that, I mean, and we saw like it was a large change of population in the 47-49, but something would have happened before. I mean, during the British mandate period, something could have happened that would show some patterns, some changes on the ground that would show that the actual policies that they were implemented in the 47, they were also implemented in another way, but even before. So we could argue that, I mean, that the settled colonial projects, not only in Palestine in this case, but around the world as well, I mean, they changed the tactics, they changed the implementation of the policies depending on the needs on the ground of the project itself. Thank you. Sorry for so in this case, I mean, I analyzed the British mandate period through I took 4 sub-districts, and I analyzed the demographic changes in terms of patterns, because we cannot, I mean, the population sources that are taken during the British mandate, we need to be fair and we need to know that they are not the best accurate sources that we have, but I mean, they are the only population sources that we have. So I analyzed 4 case studies, seeing how the implementation of land purchases and mainly immigration affect the development of the Palestinian or indigenous population of the British mandate period. So as I said, I mean, I did my studies in Exeter. I mean, there are some folders that are missing, but yeah, index. Okay, I know, it's okay, yeah. So, I mean, I will follow a small index. And as I said, I mean, it will be an introduction, a definition, or a discussion a little bit of the settled colonialism and its characteristics, how we make the difference from settled colonialism and colonialism. I will analyze a little bit the Israel case study, and then I will go through methodology, sources, creation of the maps, and how the project developed. And then, I mean, we could as well, I mean, talk about in more detail about the digital humanities, how I use them, and how I create the online maps and the project that I was carrying out here in the Center of Art and Humanities. I don't know, I mean, how you feel about the different topics. So in case that you have any question, any thought or something, I mean, don't feel free to interrupt me or to engage in discussion or so on. So you are welcome on that. As I said before, I mean, and as I mentioned, I mean, the case study of Palestine, but I mean, it could be extended to another case studies. I mean, the Zionist project could not survive as a demographic minority for a long period in the land under claim. We could take the example of the South African case study. There are, among other reasons, I mean, also the demographic balance of being a settled minority towards a large indigenous population is one of the main things that, I mean, that did not allow to the project to keep on going. I mean, among the other things like social movements and apartheid boycott and all these things. So the social and political situation during the British mandate did not allow to the Zionist project to make large numbers of displacement or transfer of population. They will argue that, I mean, as it happened with Greek and Turkish people, that, I mean, that the British, they should have helped them to make transfers of population, allowing the Zionist enterprise to step into Palestine in a more freely way. I mean, being able to, let's say, to conquer the land without obstacles. The British, I mean, they did not accept on the ground this option. I mean, even they did help, or they did manage to allow them to do land purchases and to expel displaced tenants when there were court decisions and so on. But the Zionists, they saw themselves in a position where they could not displace large number of population, so the only possible tool for them to make population changes on the ground, was to buy land, and once that the land ownership changed from Arab ownership to a Jewish national fund or another kind of entities, displace the tenants that they were working there before. I mean, this I mean, did not happen in all the cases, but I mean, there is a clear pattern that, as I will show it later, I mean, with Nazareth and Haifa, that it will showing that when the land purchases changed from ownership, the land ownership changed, there is a change on the demographics on that village. So at the time, and the only possible tool for them was to buy land and displace the tenants in that way. So that would make like not a large number of changes on the ground, but would allow them as well, I mean, to step in and to maintain an influence and to create the necessary structures for later, as we saw, I mean, in the Nakba, to be able to make large expulsions. So that's why, I mean, I will argue, I mean, that, I mean, the British mandate period is one of the key periods to understand the Nakba precondition and why the Nakba happened. We cannot analyze the Nakba as one isolated event. We need to analyze it in a far more complex line of time, where, I mean, when, as I said before, where the settled colonial project and needs change over the time, depending what the settled colonial project needs to do. So, what is the settled colonial project? I mean, we keep on talking about these kind of things, and it is, I mean, a quite new approach, I mean, to the field, and it's making a difference from colonialism in some ways. I mean, so settled colonialism was developed was developed in a way because I mean the classical colonialism theories that were not answering some case studies. So why, I mean, when colonialism finished, I mean, or this, let's say, not this economical colonialism that we could have, but I mean, taking, for example, the case study of Britain in India, I mean, was finished. I mean, the British, they went back to the metropole. So I mean, there were some countries that they were following those patterns, but there were others, like could be Australia, could be South Africa, as I said, I mean, Canada, or United States of America, that I mean that they were not following those patterns. I mean the colonialism was finished. I mean this was developed in another way, but I mean the settlers, they were still there. So people started to think and to look to different approaches, and settled colonialism was developed as a theory as well related to that. So, but settled colonialism in the beginning could be misunderstood as colonialism as well, because I mean, in the beginning, I mean, both settlers, they go to the land. Some of them, they have like a metropole behind. Most of them, they don't. Because that's why it's an ongoing discussion with settled colonialism, because some people may argue that, I mean, that Algeria is not, other people, they argue that it is. I mean, there are different patterns related to demography, to how the settlers, they develop in the land. It is not the same to analyze the, let's say, more Anglo-Saxon oriented settled colonial case studies that could be Australia or North America, or the Spanish related settled colonial case studies that were longer on time, and the population was mixed more since the beginning. So it was created a new strata in the society as Creole settlers, I mean indigenous settlers, mix of both of them. So, as I said, I mean, there is a field that is still on discussion, and is bringing us a good opportunity also to frame Israel inside this umbrella. One of the main characteristics, then I will talk about the case study, and I will go in depth with these characteristics. But I mean, apart from, I would say, Algeria, I mean, the rest of the settled colonial case studies, I mean, in the Anglo-Saxon case studies, they did not have a metropole behind. The settlers, they did not have a metropole behind. There were people, at most, that they were escaping from persecution. There were people that were condemned. There were people that were escaping from Europe from different religious wars, and so on and so forth. So they had no possibility to go back to a place where any longer they were welcome. So they needed to create a new sovereignty in the place that they were going. So that's one of the main differences between colonialism and settled colonialism. As I said, I mean, first of all, I mean that this is also related to colonialism. I mean, they need a claim to the land. I mean, there is no option to step in a place without a claim in the land. The claim in the land could be different because of different reasons. There could be religious, there could be backwardness, or because of the underdeveloped indigenous population on the ground, where the metropole with far more technological advantage are raised there and displaced, or ending place the population living there. But one of the main characteristics of the settled colonial case studies is that deny the existence of the native population. I mean, they make them in the narratives, in the analysis, they make them not being part of the land. We can see it in what happened in Palestine, in the narrative of the Zionist case study, that as I said before, I mean, there are the Palestinians that don't belong to Palestine, they belong to the Arab world, they're bound to other Arab cities. They are no longer, I think that Golda Meir said, what Palestinians were are they? I mean, they are not, they don't exist. So, I mean, the first step, to step in the land is also deny the existence of the native population. As I said before, I mean, one of the other characteristics of the settled colonial case studies is that the settlers, they bring the sovereignty with them. It's not that they are a step in, let's say, in India, like they did the British, and they are working for the king or the queen at the time, the settlers, I mean, they need to bring the sovereignty with them because they don't bound to another metropole. Apart from, let's say, I mean, as I said, Algeria, that, I mean, this is another case study, and I mean, even they don't follow this pattern, I mean, it's a settled colonial case study. So, I mean, we could argue as well, I mean, that before the replacement of population, I mean, there are different options for the settled colonial entities case studies to develop with the indigenous population. Depends on the needs always of the settlers. We could think about, for example, of Australia or South Africa. I mean, South Africa, I mean, being a large minority of the of the total population of the country. I mean, you need a land force. You need people to work for you. So, I mean, there are in Australia. I mean, they need it in the beginning, but if you have an external supply of settlers, you could overtake those numbers. So, at some point, I mean, you could argue. I mean, Lorenzo Berrazzini, one of the main scholars that deals with settled colonial theories, I mean, he argued that, I mean, you work with me until you disappear, until you are no longer useful for me. So, and then once the replacement of population could be physical, could be in different ways. I mean, you don't need to displace them physically. I mean, you don't need to make them disappear. You can just displace them and let them not see them. I mean, as it's happening, for example, in Palestine today, where, I mean, with this settled Israeli Zionist settler community, when even there are Palestinians living in what is today, what was the British Mandate period, they don't see each other. I mean, it's like having ghosts on the ground. I mean, they don't need to see them. There are mechanisms that they allow them not to see them. For example, coming from a settlement in the West Bank, I mean, they don't need to face like Palestinians because they have their own roads and so on and so forth. So, according to the replacement needs of the settled colonial case studies, I mean, they take for example, some of the characteristics of the indigenous populations, so they indigenize themselves, the settlers, and the indigenous people, they are detached from the ground. So, for example, I mean, how many American? I mean, I'm taking an example of the American sports teams that they take like American Indian and indigenous characteristic symbols and so on to legitimize their places on the ground, saying that we are native, we are people that they bound to this land, and we are being here always. Or, for example, with the food falafel or this Israeli, well, I mean, it's around the world, like what you can find. Yeah, but they saw it as an Israeli food, as an Israeli thing, the falafel, or other kind of things. I mean, if you go to Barcelona to the farm, to a market, you could find like they're selling falafel as an Israeli product and unique. I mean, it's a way to indigenize the settlers and to take off from the settlers their identity and replace their space, identity, and all kinds of connections with the land. I mean, as I said, I mean, before, I mean, also one of the main characteristics, at least in the narrative, because then, I mean, of course, I mean, like we can argue that did not happen, is the peaceful attitudes to settlement. The settlers, they are not aggressive, they are not doing any harm to the indigenous people. In Australia, it did not happen. They were like people, I mean, that arrived there and they were doing some massacres, but they were not the settlers. They always hide behind all the things. I mean, they have a narrative of saying that we are not ending cleansers. We are not. I mean, Derya Sin only happened once and was one thing that happened, unfortunately, but only once. Then, I mean, of course, I mean that there is another field that, I mean, that analyzes these things another way. So, I will argue that, I mean, to me, I mean, one of the three main characteristics of the settled colonial case studies, there are the land, the population, and the labor. You cannot develop a settled colonial case study without stepping into a land. I mean, there is no possibility to create a settled colonial case study, a settled colonial project, without stepping into a land and having access to land. I mean, Patrick Wolf was he died like 2 years ago, I think. he argued, I mean, he had a really famous phrase with saying, I mean, the main characteristic or the main interest for the settled colonial project is not religion, is not the race, is access to land. The first thing that they need is access to land. Without access to land, I mean, all the things that they come after it, I mean, they are not possible. So, and then, I mean, we could argue, as I said before, I mean, that to become like a settled colonial majority, for the project to be a successful project, I mean, to be long enough in time to develop the structure and everything of a country, of a settled country, it needs to be a demographic majority, or at least, I mean, be able to manage the numbers of demography. When you take different case studies, that could be, I always bring the same as Australia, South Africa. Why? I mean, when the Australian settlers, they start to assimilate, or they wanted to assimilate the indigenous population, when they were not a threat any longer for the settled colonial case study. When they were like a 3, 5, or let's say 10% of the population, you could assimilate them into the settled colonial country, taking all the structures that you have developed, not before. I mean, if you try to assimilate, for example, the 80% of population towards like a 20% of population, that would fail. So we have different cases, different examples, but I mean, one of the main examples is that they push for the demographic majority on the ground, so that would make them survive in the long term. That's what Israel, I mean, the Zionist settled colonial case study has been fighting for it in the last hundreds of years. I mean, that's why they have, I mean, different policies towards the population on the ground. And then, I mean, the labor, as I said before, I mean, you need to work for me until you disappear, or you will work for me until you no longer you are useful for my project. So, I mean, they create, I mean, as Patrick well said, I mean, they create their own structure. It's not an event. The settled colony is a structure that, I mean, faces change strategies all the time. So the Zionists, yes, but I mean, in a more general way, I mean, the settled colonial project, they need to create their own structures on the ground. And one of them, I mean, we will see it later, and as you know, I mean, it was denying the opportunities to indigenous population. I mean, one of the main things of the Jewish National Fund, I mean, when they were buying land, I mean, is denying the access to the labor market to the Palestinians themselves. So when you deny the access and the future in economically speaking, I mean, to the population, they need to live, they need to go somewhere else, so there are different ways of displacing, moving population away from the settled colonial country. Then, as I said before, I mean, access to land is the first motive for elimination, not race, religion, productivity, and so on. But there is one of the Israel is unique in this case, because I mean, compared to other case studies, I mean, I'm not an expert on Northern American, I mean, in the American history, but I mean, I think that, I mean, they bought some lands to the indigenous people, but I mean, in the difference with Israel is in the beginning, the first step into the land was by buying land, because I mean, they were not able, let's buy land, concessions, and so on and so forth. They were not able to, of course, because they were a sponsor. I mean, at that time, I mean, we're under Ottoman administration, and when the British stepped in, they were the colonial force allowing the settled colonial project to step in. They were not the main one that they were taking decisions in terms of land purchases, in terms of displacement of population. So they were the British there allowing or not allowing them to do things. As I said, I mean, the settled colonial case studies, I mean, they bring the sovereignty with them, and that means border, and that means analyzing these case studies as other nation states and imagine communities with borders, identities, and all these things. I mean, but the only thing that Israel, I mean, is the only case study that has no borders declares. So, yeah. So taking Israel as a case study, I mean, the Zionists arrived there the first step in the land, I mean, 1880s, 1878, and they tried to settle, but they failed to settle there properly. Then from 1880s, I mean, there were no Zionists, I mean, of course, because Zionism started later. But I mean, the Jews from Europe, they start moving to today's Palestine after the pogroms in Russia. As I said, I mean, the first attempts were done by land purchases, and in a long perspective, I mean, as I mentioned before, I mean, the Zionist project, I mean, changes their strategies depending the needs on the ground. I mean, it's not the same. It was not the same for them to face the Ottoman administration, the British mandate, what happened with Nakba, or later on with the 6 Day War, I mean, June War, or the settlements in the occupied territories nowadays. I mean, they changed the characteristics of on the ground, but always with the same aim in their mind. I mean, to become or to change the demographic balance of the population for making sure that the project, I mean, will survive. As I said, I mean, the first stages were done by purchase, but they were not impressive numbers. 6%. I mean, doesn't sound a lot, but if we analyze that 6% of land, I mean, we take it to the different type of land that was in Palestine, that would be that Sami Hadawi divided in 3 different qualities. That 6% is the most fertile land in Palestine, and it will come out more or less, I mean, roughly in numbers, I mean, to be almost the 25% of the most fertile land on Palestine. Of course, later on we have, I mean, I will show you a map, and that map, you know it. I mean, that the land purchases, they were done in really strategic areas. They were not spread in the land. So later on, as was proved in the Nakba, I mean, they were able, and it was easy for them to make defensive construction, and the settlements that were created outposts to be able to defend their positions. But we need to analyze, I mean, that even the 6% of the land purchase doesn't sound like huge. It allowed them to create the necessary structures for later on Nakba and the declaration, I mean, and the declaration of the State of Israel. So, as I said, I mean, I keep on saying the same thing, but I mean, different stages will bring them to different strategies. I mean, by law, by economic pressure, by making bigger Jerusalem, as we saw last month. I mean, just declaring the capital of Israel, Trump, or creating small settlements. Taking natural sources from them, water, and so on. I mean, there are different type of strategies that they will consolidate the project on the ground, and they will make difficult the indigenous population to live in the land. So this is more related to Israel, but I mean, I will argue, and I always argue that, I mean, that they need to be a demographic majority in order to survive. That's why they declared themselves a Jewish state. I mean, it's not. I mean, there is no other option for them to become a demographic majority over the land, because otherwise, I mean, if they declare themselves like a democratic country, and they allow people to vote, and you are a minority, talking about ethnically, or talking about the balance between indigenous and settlers, I mean, you will have a government that will not allow you to implement those policies. So one of the main goals that they do have, I mean, is to be a demographic majority over the land, and if they don't allow the native indigenous population to have the same representation or the same rights as the settlers, it will be an apartheid state. And being an apartheid state, I mean, we know what happened with South Africa, and that's what they are trying to hide. But I mean, if we analyze what kind of policies they do have in Israel, I mean, they are pushing to that thing. I mean, as I mentioned before, one of the main characteristics to have a claim of the land as you may know, for the Zionists. Was they were saying that, I mean, there was an empty land. There was no Palestinian, nothing there, And yeah, apart from the West promised that land for them, I mean, there was a land without people for people without land. I mean, they knew that, I mean, there was people there. Of course that they knew it, but I mean, it's one of their strategies of the settled colonial projects to deny the existence of the native population, so you have no moral issues of displacing them or making them disappear. And as I said before, I mean, later on they argued that they were bound to other Arab centers, discussing with the British authorities, please, I mean, transfer this population to what later was Jordan or to Syria or to Lebanon or somewhere else, Iraq, because these are Arabs. They are coming from the Gulf. They are coming from somewhere else. They are not bound to this land. One of the main things that, I mean, the Zionists did, I mean, is create their own economic structures, and doing that, I mean, they were displacing as I said before, displacing the Palestinians from the market. The conquest of labor displacing the indigenous population, the Palestinian population from the market, and not hiring policies in settlements. I'm talking about the Jewish National Fund because there were other settlements that they were sponsored by Baron Rothschild, for example, that they were before the Zionists stepped into Palestine, that they were more related to the economic profit because they were hiring Palestinian population, of course. I mean, they saw that, I mean, the weather and the climate in the Middle East, I mean, was not really good for the Ashkenazi Jews that they were coming from Russia or from Poland. I mean, they did not want to work in the settlement under the sun, so they tried. I mean, it was difficult for them, so they tried to hire Arab population. When, I mean, the Jewish National Fund, of course, refused to do that. I mean, they brought some of the Yemeni Jews to try to replace the Arab population. So, I mean, there were people that were more used to work with this type of weather rather than the Ashkenazi Jews that were coming from Europe. Of course, I mean, the second Aliyah, I mean, was a more there were people that they were more prepared in terms of they were not poor peasants that they were escaping from pogroms. I mean, there were people that they were living in cities before, that they had university degrees. So, I mean, of course, that they were willing to live maybe in Haifa, in Jaffa, on cities like that, rather than being in a kibbutz working the land. So I have one small paragraph by David Hacohen. I mean, this was one of the Mapai leaders, and he's showing this kind of things that I was talking about before. So he's saying, like, I remember being one of the first of our comrades of the I cannot pronounce that. I'm sorry. To go to London after the First World War. I became a socialist. I had to fight my friends on the issue of Jewish socialism to defend the fact that I would not accept Arabs in my trade union, the Histadrut, to defend preaching the housewives that they not buy at Arab stores, to prevent Arab workers from getting jobs there, to pour kerosene on Arab tomatoes, to attack Jewish housewives in the markets and smash the Arab eggs they had bought, to praise to the skies the Jewish National Fund that sent Hakim to Beirut to buy land from absentee effendis, and to throw the fellahin off the land, to buy dozens of dunams for an Arab is permitted, but to sell, God forbid, one Jewish dunam to an Arab is prohibited. So here we can see one of some of the things that I was talking before. I mean, they not hiring policies, displacement, developing their own structures. I mean, one that the land purchases that are done. I mean, displacement of fellahin, of the peasants. They were really clear on their aims. I mean, and they write down almost everything. So for us, I mean, it's really useful because we know. I mean, in all the letters. I mean, at the time, and they were talking about displacement. They were talking about. I mean, being a demographic majority, the need of being a demographic majority on the land, or for example, how being a socialist you could not accept a comrade, a worker, I mean, as you in your trade union. I mean, at the time, I can imagine that for people it would have been shocking. And why? I mean, if it's not a Jew, you will not accept it in your trade union. I mean, you are talking about the solidarity between the working class. I mean, it's not. This is the opposite. And yeah, and so this is a really clear. Yeah.
When was this text written?
I mean, I can check it later. I mean, I can go through the down is the reference.
Yeah, right.
But I guess, I mean,
Is British Jewish?
I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, I think it was between the First World War and 48.
Okay.
Yeah, it was during the British Mandate period. I can check it later in the yeah. So as I said before, I mean, and this map is really well known by everybody. I mean, if we see the land purchases, I mean, they are in the most fertile parts of what was the British Mandate period, and not surprisingly, the UN partition plan is taking all those lands as a shape. I mean, it's almost the same shape. When you take the layers and they almost are the same. Of course, that we know that. I mean that by the time the Palestinian political elites, they were in exile, they were displaced after the revolt, and so on and so forth. But we can see how they match almost in the same way. Those lands that they are there in the first picture. I mean, they are one of the most, as I said, the most fertile lands in Palestine, and apart from that small part in what is close to Beersheba, in the south, and around Jerusalem. I mean, the rest. I mean, is like creating like a line, like an iron wall. I think that was. I don't remember who was the Zionist leader that he defined it in that way. So later on, I mean, we see the maps on 49, 67, and 2000, and it's a permanent loss of land and permanence. I mean, it's. And that loss on land as well, I mean, is putting economic and demographic pressure on the Palestinian. So, as I said before, I mean, the Nakba could not happen without the British Mandate period, and without stepping or creating all these structures by the settled colonial project to be able to make the displacement of the Palestinian population in 47, 49. So, as I said, I mean, they were not able to displace people. They were not able to make big changes on the ground by buying land. So, in the 47, 49, they did have another opportunity. Of course, that they were working for it and they were prepared for it. But I mean, the settled colonial project changed the strategies depending on the needs at the time, and they had an opportunity to make large numbers of displacement, because coming back to the other map, I mean, in the UN partition, I mean, pretty much the population that was living in the Jewish Israeli side of the white side, I mean, in that part of the map, I mean, there was 50-50 the population living there. So you could create a new country where you are not a demographic majority, and when you want to be a demographic majority on the land, so I mean, you need to do something related to that. In terms of demography, and this is more related to my project, what we would expect from the population at the time. I mean, there were different improvements in terms of food, health, communications. I mean, was more connected to the world. I mean, being part of the British Mandate and so forth and so on and so forth. So you could expect like an increase of population, because people eat better, because you have better medical supplies, because I mean the roads there are better connected because of the military improvement of the British Mandate and so on and so forth. So you could expect that the population grows. The main Zionist immigration, I mean, apart from the Yishuv that was living there before, I mean, was coming from outside, as we know. I mean, we have like some of the data related to the immigration that they went there. I mean, to the legal immigration, of course, that the illegal immigration we could not follow it, and So according to the demographic transition theories that later on I will show you like in a small picture to see how different countries develop. This is really easy theory on population. What would expect from in Palestine? What would happen in Palestine? So I mean, as I said, I mean, there were different reasons for the Arab population to increase in population because of health, economy, social, and many things. So first of all, and as we will see here in a population pyramid shape and the demographic transition model, I mean, in the beginning, because of this, before the demographic transition theory started, I mean, you need to have like high rates of birth to overtake the high rates of death, to keep the population live. I mean, you need to have lot of birth, because some of them they don't even last for years. So you need to have like 4, 7, 8, or 9 children, because some of them they are not gonna make it through. But that's why, I mean, that's the first step, when you see that the population is not going up. What happens when you start just being better fed? I mean, when you eat better, when you have better supplies, better medical take care, and so on. That in the beginning, the death rates, they come down. But I mean, it takes time for the birth rates to come down as well. So that's where you have like an increase of population. Later on, I mean, when the death rates they are stable, when you know that, I mean, that, I don't know, when 5 children out of 1,000 only die after 5 years, when it's more stable, when people live longer, instead of living 30 years, they live like 60, and so on, the birth rates also come down. That is also connected to the welfare, how much money that you could have, and so on. And then, I mean, in the last step, I mean, is where the population goes really come up, and they stabilize in similar patterns. Here down, I mean, we have different cases where they show the pyramids and the countries at the time, just to make an idea. I mean, we're talking about that every country has its own characteristics. They could change in different patterns and ways, but I mean, it's just to have an idea, I mean, to understand how a population would behave. So, I mean, at that time we would expect like the Arab population to increase, but what is happening, I mean, we will need to show, and later on we will see, I mean, that then in some cases it's not happening. And of course that there is an external influence to that patterns that is not allowing them to increase. So I use the demography to measure or to see the influence of the settled colonial project. As I said, I mean, the Zionists, they did not buy land in the same areas and with the same aim. So, I mean, look into different sub-districts and look into the different villages, we will see that different patterns that will come out. And what I'm doing, and because of I have here some of the censuses. What I'm doing is I'm looking to the growth rates of the different populations during the British Mandate period, because I mean the information provided by the sources, the population sources at the time, they are not really, as we can imagine. I mean, it's almost 100 years ago, and they are not really deep and profound population sources, but they are allowing us to work with them and to see some patterns. So the first thing that I needed to do, because this is part of the project and was part of my thesis as well, there are 4 population sources for the British Mandate period that they talk about with village names. Sorry. The first thing that I need to do to be able to calculate the growth rates, how much the population changed from one population source to the other, village by village, was to redesign the population sources. So we are talking about that, for example, in different population sources, the British, they collect different names, different places. In the 22 for Haifa, for example, they could have 100 names, but in 31 they have 160. So you need to put all these names in the same boundaries, so you make sure as accurate that it could be, to make sure that the population that was living inside that boundary was living there. For example, I mean, taking for example the cases Beirut as a case study. Okay, I mean, you could say, okay, Beirut in 1922 was 100 people living there. But I mean, and later on, I mean, Hamra was included there. But in the 31 was not included Hamra inside, but Hasmiyeh was. But in 38, Hasmiyeh wasn't, but Mar Michael and Bors Hamoud was. So you need to reframe the boundaries of the municipality to be able to say, okay, from 22 to 48, or to 45 in this case, the people that was living in this area is the people that was living in Hamra, Hasmiyeh, and so on and so forth. So you make sure that the people was living there for the whole period. So with that, I mean, you create you make the growth rates, and you see how the population changes. As I said before, I mean, the 1922, this is for Haifa. It's providing us with 109 village names, 31 with 169, 38, 87, 45, 84. So we need to put, I mean, what I did is I took the boundaries of 1945, and I took all the villages that they appeared there, and I looked for them in the Atlas of Palestine that was published by Salman Abu Sitta in 2010, I think. So I went one by one, looking for the villages and putting them inside the boundaries of 1945. So this is, for example, Haifa in 1945, and the black small lines, there are previous villages that they needed to be merged in a bigger entity because how the population sources were taken. As I said before, Hamra inside Beirut, later outside, but Mar Michael inside, or yeah. So that's, for example, taking the case of Hadera. For example, in 1922, Hadera included Gan Samuel, Sarkas Herbet, Safeh, Hefziba, Dumeiri, Fukara, Nufayat, and Anfaya. For example, if we see 31, I mean, Anfayat is not appearing as a name, but in 1922, the name appeared with population. So what you need to do is to put in the boundaries inside Hadera, you need to put the population of that village. In 31, the name changes. For example, in 38, we can see that, I mean, the settlement was created, Kefar Brandeis. So also on the land, we can see that, I mean, that time, because of land purchases and because of different, because of land purchases and the Zionist settlement project, settlements that were created and they were giving names to them. There are some cases, for example, I mean, for Kefa Baruch, that is in Nazareth, that, I mean, was established in 1924. So it's not possible for you to, or for the British authorities to collect the name of that settlement in 22 because it was not existing. So you have an Arab village living there. I mean, you have an Arab village there. It was named there. But later on in the 31, that Arab village is not named anymore and keeps the name of the settlement. So you need to work with those names, with those populations, to make them accurate enough for being able to work with the population growth rates. So taking the results of Haifa that we are analyzing, for example, I mean, we are talking about 51 villages with Arab population. In all villages in Haifa, there were living Arabs from the beginning. In 11 of them, there is a decrease of Arab population. So the growth rate is showing that the Arab population is decreasing. I'm not saying how much, I'm not analyzing, I mean, I'm just considering that it's decreasing. On the other hand, I mean, we have like, this is from 22 to 45. I mean, 22 villages where there is Jewish population living there. In one of them, only in one of them, there is a decrease of population. So we can see, I mean, there's this different trend in the pattern towards both, Arab and Jews. When we analyze the total population, I mean, we can see that almost not, just in 2 cases of 51, there is a total population decreasing. If we compare that with the Arab and Jewish results, what it's suggesting is that it's been a replacement of population. What happened in those 9 villages that the Arab population was decreasing? In those 9 villages where the Arab population was decreasing, or 10 villages, sorry, that the Arab population was decreasing and not the Jews. I mean, the Jewish population is overtaking the numbers of the Arab population. If we analyze it in a more detailed way, I mean, if we analyze the villages where the Arab population and Jewish population they were living together, we have 22 cases. In those 22 cases, in 9 of them, the Arab population is decreasing. Whereas if we analyze the villages where the Arab population lives and there is no influence of land purchases or immigration of the Zionist project, we have two villages that decrease. The decreases of population, they could have different reasons. I'm not saying that, I mean, in all cases they will be the Zionists who are displacing the Arab population. I mean, a decrease of population will come because of a bad harvest, because of internal fights, because of lack of opportunities of work, because of different things. What I'm trying to show, I mean, is that there are patterns. I mean, it's not like I'm counting and I'm saying this amount of people was affected because of the land purchases. I'm aware of the data and I'm aware of the difficulties to deal with this on the ground. So, I mean, what I'm trying to show is these patterns in terms of percentages, numbers, and so on. There are other type of tools to be able to analyze these case studies. For example, could be oral history, going through newspapers at the time, medical records, and so on and so forth. If it was a plague, if it was a malaria problem, if it was an internal fight between sects, or it was, I don't know, different things. I mean, so there are different tools that, of course, I mean, that they could be merged with this demographic analysis that will help and strengthen the results of the demographic analysis for the future. So, I mean, we have, for example, in this case, the maps of 22 and 45 in terms of Haifa. So, in the beginning, this one, I mean, is where in the blue boundaries there are the places where the Zionists they were before 22, where according to the British Mandate population sources, they were living in those areas. And this is the outcome of 1945. So we see that, I mean, the increase of population in terms of places that they bought land, and the red areas, there are as I said, villages where the Arab population disappeared. Where in 1922 was living Arab population there, and 1945 is no longer living there. I mean, in all of them, I mean, there is a Jewish population living in the village, in the entity in this case. And as I said, I mean, there is a replacement of population in some of the cases. The yellow ones is where there is a decrease of population. In 2 of those cases, in Rihaniya and I think it's Butaymat, I'm not really. There is no interference of land purchases. Could be other reasons. Not in these cases, it's not because of the Zionist policies. Then there are other cases, as you see. I mean, that there are land purchases, but there is no decrease of population. That could be because of other, I mean, sort of reasons that they bought a small plot of land, or they were not displaced, or yeah. And then in Kabara, I mean, in one of that one in orange color, I mean, is the decrease in Jewish population. I mean, we know they got a concession in Kabara for drawing a swamp in there. I mean, they had like some properties, but according to the census, they were not living there. Maybe they were living in Tantura, they were living in the nearby villages, but I mean, according to the censuses, I mean, they were living in the beginning and they were not at the end. This is bringing another thing, that the population sources, they are not named. I mean, they are just numbers, so we cannot track the population. We could see and we could analyze maybe in another way, village by village, seeing, for example, I mean, if a population decrease in village name A, if there is a non-normal increase of population in the surrounded villages. We could analyze that in that way, but we would never know if the same population that was living in the A and left is the same one that settled in the nearby villages. We cannot know it because there are no names. So, I mean, it's not like analyzing and working with modern censuses, surveys that we have names, we have addresses, and I mean, we're talking about 100 years old population sources. So if we analyze, on the other hand, as I was saying, I mean, according to demographic transition theories, the Jenin subdistrict, there is no Jewish population living there, because I dismissed the population that was less than the 2% of the total population. Of course, I mean, in Jenin they were living like 10 Jews according to the population sources, but I mean, compared to the thousands of Arabs that were living there, I mean, it was really, really a small thing. So I mean, I dismiss in all the cases, no matter it was Jew or it was Arab, those numbers that were less than the 2% of the total population. So the outcome is that, I mean, there is no decrease of population. So according to the demographic transition theories, I mean, is the expected patterns, I mean, they are happening, that the population grows. Better supplies, better food, longer life expectancies, and so on and so forth. And if we take it, I mean, 4 case studies together, in this case, I mean, with all sub-districts that I worked, I mean, we see how the main big picture. I mean, there are 18 villages out of 208 that they are decreasing. There are already 3 villages that they are in Nazareth. They only have Jewish population, Merhavia and other 2 that I don't remember the name. There are 33 villages or entities with a Jewish population, and only one of them there is a decrease of population. And also we have 211 villages, and only in 3 of them there is a total decrease of population. That we can see, as I said before, I mean, a replace pattern on population. And if we analyze the Arabs and the villages where the Arabs and the Jews that were living together, in half of them the Arab population decreased, whereas in 3 out of 178 only is where the Arab population decreases, when there is no land purchases. So I'm talking about big patterns. I mean, of course, I mean, I'm not trying to count there, but I'm trying to bring patterns. And I said before, I mean, other people who may be interested in using all the kind of methodologies, as I said, oral history, newspapers at the time, medical records, and so on, to see in depth any case study. So one of the conclusions, I mean, it's like in almost 20% of the villages that there were Arab population living in the beginning. At the end, in the Haifa sub-district, there was not Arab population living there. So we can see a big, I mean, after redesigning the censuses, after redesigning the boundaries, you can see that out of those 51 villages, almost in the 20% of them, there was Arab population living, and later on at the end of the mandate wasn't. So the only possible solution for the Zionist settled colonial project to survive on the ground was to buy land and displace the tenants there. I mean, it was not, as I said, big impressive numbers, but I mean, important enough to change the conditions later on for 47-49 of the settled colonial project. So, as I said before, I mean, the displacement of population or all these big macroscopic picture of the settled colonial needs, of the demographic needs of the settled colonial project, I mean, they already started in the British Mandate period as well. We cannot start talking about what happened in Palestine without thinking and talking about what happened in the British Mandate period as the main key thing to understand the Nakba outcome. And as I said, I mean, and I keep on talking and repeating the same thing, I mean, the settled colonial project, not only in Israel, in Palestine, talking about the Zionist settled colonial project, but all around the world, they changed tactics and techniques depending on the needs of the project at the time. I mean, for example, in Australia, I mean, I think that was 2-3 years ago, they were trying to pass like a law for the northern territories, trying to assimilate, trying to take the indigenous population kids from the parents, arguing that, I mean, that they were alcoholics, they were not able to fit in the society, and so I mean, they changed different tactics depending on the needs of the project, on the needs of the settled colonial project at the time. Of course, Australia, I mean, we are talking about the low numbers of indigenous population, whether, as I said before, with any longer they are a threat to to the status quo of the settled colonial project. Whereas if we are talking about Palestine, and this is an ongoing process, that's why, for example, in the 90s, they brought 1 million of Russians. That's why, I mean, they put money researching how to make this fertility clinics, how, I mean, they see the demographic threat always as a big, big thing. That's why they did not, even they said that, that the West Bank is going to be part of, or is de facto, the international community needs to accept that Jerusalem and the West Bank as part of Israel. They will never give the identity or the passport to the Palestinians unless, because I mean, there are few million, so there will be the status quo and the balance of the demographic balance on the ground would be in danger. So it depends on the project and on the time. I mean, they take different decisions. Digital humanities, how all these things could be connected and merged through digital humanities? Where are digital humanities actually? Oh, I think that's, I took like an old example of the PowerPoint, so no worries. So it's a new emerging field that merges different disciplines. And in this case, in my case, I'm using spatial demography. I mean, you can find. I mean, I had in the other PowerPoint. I'm sorry, but I have different examples. For example, that they were in this case, they were in the University of Exeter, in my old university, and in Brown University, where they have like a big department, or they are developing big departments related to digital humanities. Digital humanities doesn't lie only on spatial demography. I mean, people in English literature is jumping to digital humanities. Museums, they are recreating all the sources in 3D, so people can get better access. In this case, I mean, in my case, in my personal experience, I mean, since I'm working with population sources, I mean, the thing that I need to do, or I was trying to do, is to make easy and visual way to manage large number of data. How you could make people understand or acknowledge the process that you are doing in an easy way that everybody, even if it's not a demographer, even if it's not a person that is an expert on Palestinian history or on other kind of settled colonial theories, that you could understand what you are doing. I mean, how you make accessible academia for people. So working on that, I mean, and working with demography, I took two softwares, one for the thesis, the other one for this project, that they work with geographical information systems. I mean, there are programs that there are software that are large used in geography, geology. They provide you with all kind of options. Of course, that for my purpose and for my interest, I'm just using some of the tools that they are provided there. But as I said, I mean, I try to create simple access to difficult and big data analysis, right? So digital humanities, I mean, it's about also trying to, in my case, I mean, I was learning with a friend and helped me to develop these skills to use this software because I mean, I'm an historian, I'm not even have a social sciences background. I don't work with QGIS, with GIS systems, so I need help. So also digital humanities brings all sorts of interdisciplinary and teamwork work. So people merge from different disciplines to provide an outcome. I mean, for example, I mean, if you see, I mean, what Exeter University in the Digital Humanities Lab is working on, I mean, there are people working in this under the same umbrella that they are coming from different disciplines, from English literature, from history, from geology, from archaeology, they are creating, for example, a live map for Florence. They are digitalizing the archive of the Exeter City Football Club. They are helping museums to make 3D models of the artifacts that there are in the museum, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So in my case, I use ArcGIS and QGIS. that is, as I said, is geographic information system, that there are software mainly used by geographers. So first of all, I mean, the first thing that I needed to do, and I was showing in the maps, is to redesign the population sources, to work with geography, to make sure that the population that is moving from one side to the other is under the same geographical space. So using this program, this allowed me to work on the computer and later on make it public, publish it in a website. One of the main project that I'm doing here would be the outcome of the 4 sub-districts, like redesign and see how the population sources change and so on. But I mean, this could go further, not only in this project, but I mean, talking about that these projects and this software allow us to merge, for example, with other kind of disciplines that could be adding videos, pictures, oral history, and things like that. I mean, for example, we could create a map of the Nakba where you could show pictures of every villages, where you can merge it with oral history of people, where they were talking about a certain village, when it was displaced, and how, and so on and so forth, when you will provide also the data, demographic data, or pictures, aerial pictures, and so on. So doing that, I mean, we grant access to researchers from different disciplines that they could use this type of sources. I mean, digital humanities also is something that is providing access. Under my perspective as well, because it's an ongoing field that has been through a large. He's going through discussion as well. But I really think that that we need to break these boundaries of academia. Sometimes when everything we keep it on our pocket and our research is ours like our treasure that we hide it. And as far as we can just open access to people, we enrich also our research. Because you could bring it through the eyes of other people from other backgrounds that could provide really, really good comments about what you are doing, and also you can open research options to other disciplines and to other researchers. For example, if I'm bringing patterns of, as I said before, of the British mandate demographics, maybe a sociologist would tell me, well, what happened in this certain area. Or they could analyze in a more, working class theories of why the population changes in this area, in that, the other, or gender studies. Why you analyzing the development of the women related to the countryside in Palestine. It gives you like an open access or all kind of options. And this is not working. I tried to open it later and it wasn't working. So the project here in the AUB was related to create a website that would grant open access to researchers. In case the library contains oral records, I couldn't do it. Because it was a short time, and this also it's not something that this could stop here. I said before. This could be. I'm analyzing for sub-district. What I would like to do was to open to the rest of the sub-district in Palestine. Of course, I could, or everybody could work on the Nakba, or just work on other case studies. When I was talking before about settler colonial needs, of talking about demography, I'm also proposing in a way like a methodology to analyze, for example, not only Palestine in the British mandate, but also you could analyze the Judaization process in Nazareth that was after the Nakba, or you could analyze how the Canadian authorities, or authorities or settlers, they developed the changes in demography in the 50s, 40s, 60s in Saskatchewan, in the Midlands of Canada, or as far as you can have population sources and boundaries. You could use these methodologies to see how successful, how were the patterns of the settler colonial project. I have here one of the talking about the poet. I have, where is it? Just a minute. I have one of the outcomes that, okay, here's the workshop, yeah. To show how would look no. Do we have Firefox here? Because otherwise it's not allowing to open it. No, it needs to be Firefox. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, let's see if I can make it. I'm not used to. Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to show you like one of the maps that I'm working on. Okay. Okay. Yalla. And this would be the outcome, how I work with the digital anomalies, how I use the QEIS. QEIS is an open source of GIS, it's quantum GIS. It's an open source of a GIS type of software. Then you have ArcGIS that is under license paid source. But in this case, I mean, I was using, it's underdeveloped. I mean, they are making some, it's missing Haifa. But I mean, this, for example, we have Kabatia in this case. And for example, if someone wants to analyze the population of the British Mandate in Kabatia, we have, I mean, then we will explain that MM is Muslim male population, MF is Muslim female population, Muslim total population, Jewish, Christian. I mean, it would be a list of aberrations that will explain the aberrations. But we can see here, for example, clicking everywhere in the world, wherever you are, clicking on the map, it will provide you with the information related to the population on Kabatia from 22, 31, 38, and 45. So if you are interested in different patterns, I mean, these are the redesigned population sources. Then, I mean, there are going to be other maps that are going to provide other kind of information. In total, there are going to be 8. But just to make an idea how this work, how I use digital humanities to, in this case, I mean, it's spatial demography, how I use QEIS to work with numbers to make the data, the geographical space, and add the population data to the actual map. I mean, wherever you are, I mean, you could like click on every kind of village, and it will provide you the data. There are going to be, as I said, I mean, 8 different maps that they will provide you different names, different numbers, different. I think it's going to be different analysis. So with this, I mean, the Center of Art and Humanities, I mean, will provide like an open source in terms of population data of the British Mandate, I mean, in this case, for sub-districts, to any kind of research, not only related to the AUB, but related to all kind of places that they want to, they do have access to internet that is widespread. So using these sources, for example, or other kind of researches, they could use this data or the later before explained patterns to develop further research, to open new lines of research, and so on and so forth. And this is a way, I mean, using digital humanities, using QEIS and spatial demography, where they could allow us to develop and to displace large numbers of data, because, I mean, if we analyze how is the process of redeshaping the maps, I mean, I was coming back. When we need to work with the censuses, and I will, no, well, I mean, I'll torture this. For example, as I said before, I mean, I needed to work with different population sources. And in this case, for example, we are seeing in blue lines the new entity, but the red colors that they are showing there, for example here, I mean, if we do it in our Just a minute. In the case of 31, that is large one, we see that how you need to merge all the population, all the data that is providing you, the population sources, you need to merge in a new entity, that's the blue one. I mean, the only way to displace this data, that, I mean, if we make bigger, I mean, I have it here somewhere, for example. I mean, we're talking about two A3 large documents that you could not tell to anyone, would you mind to work with this? We'll tell you, I mean, you are crazy. Where are you? Where telling me? So finishing the demographic research, we are able to redesign the maps and upload just the outcome, so people get really an easy access to the data, and they get rid of this old process of doing it themselves. I mean, they get the redesigned censuses through an online system where they can access everywhere, and this online system is allowing them, or will allow us, to merge with not only population sources, but with, as I said before, with pictures, with all kind of sort of things that, I mean, that we could work, documents, oral history, videos, just all kind of things that we could add to the program. So that would create like a huge map of Palestine, for example, allowing us to merge all kind of disciplines, and always through the umbrella of digital humanities, and making easy access to the academic world, and also to more normal people that are not related to academia. That, for example, like your father was, I don't know, born in, I don't know, in Lugan-Sarkia, and you are interested in what happened there, and you can go in depth what happened there. And if you are interested to research further and to talk to your grandfather or to talk to your father about what happened there, you can always develop more skills on that. So that's how I deal with the digital humanities related to the spatial demography and to the population sources. And yeah, I mean, and I have like a different type of exercises that we could do, but I don't know if you are interested in knowing how to use this program, because I'm not, I mean, I know how to use it, but I mean, I'm not a master on this program. So I think that's gonna be in mid-February, March, something like that. It's gonna come out the project. I mean, it's gonna be hosted by the CIH, as Rita said, and it's gonna be inside the web. It's gonna be inside the website with some tabs that you could access. To the. There are gonna be 8 different maps. One of them is gonna be related to the name of the villages, how, as I saw before, how they merge. The other one is gonna be the population sources, and the other 6, they are gonna be the demographic analysis of the different time frames. So from 22 to 31, 31, 38, and so forth. So I don't know, I mean, I have like different maps, different processes that I work with. I mean, if you want to have a look, if you have questions, or if you want to step into a more technical way how to deal with this program and this project, I mean, I'm happy to show, I'm happy to talk. I mean, I don't know, I mean, depends on what you need. So, yeah.
Can I just say something? I mean, this is, thank you, it's a very nice talk. It's really very interesting what you have done with the mapping. As a sociologist, I just would like to maybe just say something. That the records that you have,
The population records, you mean?
yes, these are things that you are getting from the British mandate or resources. I would just maybe wonder about the vital statistics that you have about the birth rates and the death rates.
Sorry?
You did the,
Yeah.
the census, the vital statistics, how many people were born and how many people died. You know what you showed on the, just the cultural fact. If we're talking about 100 years ago, we're talking about Palestine and we're talking about an Arab country, where maybe people would say, if I have a baby girl, I wouldn't report.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm aware of
Yeah,
that.
so just, this technical part, these are not.
No, I mean, I know, as I said before, I mean, I was saying that it's 100 years old. I mean, this is the first census of Palestine. I know that there are, I mean, that there are inaccuracies more than in a modern census, because I mean, if you can analyze how in France they was collected the census is 50 years ago, there are some people is saying that you could bring an error of 500,000 people, depending how you collect the data.
You did mention,
I know, yeah.
oral history, which is, a combination of
Yeah.
the two. I mean, maybe will lead to something else, and this is
Mhm.
something that is very interesting as well. But there were no records with
Bill-
the Palestinian, the Palestinian people at that time. I'm sure they had records.
Village by village, they weren't. Village by village, to be able to do this. I mean, they weren't. The Ottomans they took some data, but not defined by village, so you can't track them. I know that first, I mean, the Bedouins also they were collected in that way. That I mean, they are not the most accurate censuses, and that's one of the other things that we could do with this. I mean, we could work and try to minimize the error. I know, but I mean, the only population sources that we do have, there are these ones. I mean, one step would be redesign. The second would be see if. But also as well, we need to analyze and we need to understand that these are colonial censuses. They are not taken by Palestinians themselves. They are taken by British. They don't count themselves as well. They have a colonial mindset on this outcome. So
This is what I'm saying.
yeah.
It would be very interesting to merge between what we had during the Ottoman times, because I'm sure there are records.
There are some records. Yeah.
With what there was available from the Palestinian authorities at that time, and the British mandate. So that would be very interesting. And oral history of some people who are still alive and that could tell you, yes, in this family we had that many kids, they didn't report the girl because they didn't, or they had more boys than girls, etc. All this would be really very rich.
Also is related to the land ownership, because I mean, not only Palestinians but other people as well, they were not reporting the amount of land that they owned, because they were scared of being overtaxed. They were scared of during the Ottoman times, when we are talking about the land records. I mean, it's history. It's 100 years ago. We have to face these old problems. But as I said, I mean, this is opening another window to people. I mean, it's not my expertise line, but other people seeing these things, they could step in and give another shot to the numbers. And that's what I'm thinking on. I mean, because I mean. I do understand and I do know, for example, that the first British mandate population source is 68 pages. It's really far from being accurate, but it's the only population. I mean, it's the only population source that we have. Then the second one, 31, it's more complex and there are 3 volumes. I mean, 1,000 pages, and this bringing more data. And the same as the 38 and 45. I mean, they are not the less accurate ones, but it's the only thing that we can work with. I mean,
it's a stepping stone. It's the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, it would be ideal to take to be able to reconstruct the censuses, but first, before being able to take that step, I mean, we need to redesign them. We need to agree on the names that the British authorities, because they were the British, would take those numbers and those names. They decided to name these villages in such way, and we merged, as I did, with the villages. Once that we have the absolute numbers provided by the sources, we could be able to analyze first how the 22 what system was, what the procedure of the collecting data was, the 31 and the rest, and knowing how the data, because there are different ways of collecting data for creating population sources. Knowing that, we will be able to try to fix and that would be amazing, and that I would love to do it. But I mean, it's a long project. But I mean, as I said, I mean, this is a small step that will allow all kind of scholars with different backgrounds. As you said, you are a sociologist. I'm an historian, a demographer historian. We can have the same path, and that's bringing through digital humanities as well, which is allowing us to displace it. So it's a really nice and good way to engage with the academic world that opens options to. As I said, I mean, it's not good to keep our research in the pocket and say it's mine, only mine. So yeah.
You said that you had sources
Israeli what? Sorry.
Israeli statistics, did they have any?
Yeah, there is a in 1947 they published. The title is the Jewish. I mean, it was published by the Jewish National Fund. What is it? It's what is it? Oh yeah, here, the number 5. Jewish villages in Israel. It was published in 1949. I mean, but with the data of 1947, it's providing the data of 373 settlements, villages where the Jewish population was living. They provide you the data with the when the settlement was, where the village or settlement was founded, the number, short description, that what was living there, and so on and so forth. But since I'm working with the with the 4 population sources, I could cross some data. But I mean, for the Digital Humanities project, I mean, I'm not gonna, because I mean, it's just trying to redesign the censuses with the British authorities. Then I mean, for further research, as he said, I mean, related to sociology, related to land purchases, related to I was talking with a professor here that was interested on settlement grades and so on. You could merge all these data. Of course, I mean, if we analyze, for example, the land purchases that they are affecting these pictures, the land ownership, I mean, it's under key. It's not public. I mean, it's in the UN. I mean, it's in whatever they want to lock it down in Israel. The land transfers, I mean, they would be accessible, but you need to see a certain case study if you want to analyze it. Then the Palestine Exploration Fund has some maps. We know that, I mean, how much land, the area, the ownership of land. I mean, they have in London they have an archive. You could work with that. That's why I was telling, and you can add maps. You can create other shapes on the map that I showed. You can create other shapes that will overlap. For example, the demographic pictures that I saw in the presentation, with the development of the population, with red things, and this one, making it, because I have it. We will launch this online, so you will click on it. You could put the shape on the land purchases and see how it would be connected. You could add on an attribute, like as I saw, like with the numbers, you could add like name of entity that bought land, number of land. You could provide that information. That's digitalizing process that, I mean, but of course, I mean, I'm a single individual. I mean, it would be great to have a research group and an option to go through all this. But I mean, there are some data that were collected by the Jewish National Fund and the Jewish Agency that would be merged, and just one there, and then
Just a quick question. I was wondering why Central and South America were not included among settler colonies.
South America. They are starting to be discussed, because the settler colonialism comes from a phenomenon more related to Anglo-Saxon colonialism, I would say. But now, I mean, there's people talking about settler colonial case studies in South America, let's say Argentina, or cases like that. As I said before, I mean, the case studies on the Spanish.
So it would be considered.
It is,
settler.
it is.
That's
It is. The thing is, like, I mean, there is a big difference in terms of, under my perspective of demography, for example, the let's say Anglo-Saxon or more British-oriented settled colonial cases, they did not merge in population, whereas the Spanish they did.
I see.
The Spanish they did. I mean, first, I mean, we need to analyze that the British settled colonialism and settled colonial project, they started later than the Spanish. The Spanish, they stepped into South America in the 15th century, late 15th century. From that onwards, I mean, they started also to merge with the population, and they create a Creole community. That actually, that Creole community was the one who stepped out of the metropole. He would say to the metropole, we no longer need you. Simón Bolívar and these people, I mean, they are these people that they're not indigenous people. They're coming from another background. And in the case of the Spanish colonies, I mean, we are talking about 500 years. In the case of the British one, we are talking about 100, maybe 100 less years. And the attitudes towards the indigenous population, they were different. Of course, I mean, we have different case studies that will show different patterns, but I mean, broadly speaking, but yeah, I mean, there are scholars that they are bringing South American case studies to the field. But I mean, it's a new, as I said, it's a new field, set colonial studies with as well digital humanities, and I mean, I think that they are gonna bring like new research, and also maybe it's related to how visible could be the language use, because we are talking about the Spanish-speaking countries. I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm not saying that in these countries, I mean, they don't do research and publish in English, but I mean, mainly maybe I mean, I'm just talking. I mean, in general, that maybe people publish in Spanish, so it's not really accessible, or the large number of articles that are not accessible, or I don't know. But I mean, there is people researching on that. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I want to mention one thing. It's very important. During the mandate, the British, when they left Palestine, they had all the deeds. The deeds. The deeds of the land.
Deeds.
The land ownership.
Yeah.
That they are available, and anybody with a special permission can see them in the United Nations.
Yeah, but I mean, only Fishback got access to it, I think. Only Fishback, one scholar that he wrote how is the title of the book? He got access to it. I mean, if you ask for it, I mean, it will be kindly denied.
Denied?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask for it, I mean, it would be denied. I don't think that they will allow you to.
Israel asked for them for their aid.
Oh,
Yeah.
and they were denied them.
No, I think they were not denied.
If you do it, I mean.
There was a project at the UN where they had 3 couples. They gave one to the Arab League, they sent the other to PLO, and one at the United Nations.
As far as I mean, I was trying to find the land ownership, and I emailed the UN, of course. I mean, knowing the answer. I mean, they told me no way, like this. Other scholars they tried to, and I think that only Fishback. I mean, that he published this book, and I can check the book now, and I will give you the title. He got access to it. The land ownership itself, I mean, is not viable. I mean, if you go to Israel, I mean, they wouldn't. I mean, it's under lock, because otherwise that would open cases in trials. Because the ownership of land, I mean, how you could take like the 52% or later on the 60-80% of the land when the ownership is not yours. Even you create the absentee law, even you create that will open court paths towards the UN, towards the I don't. I mean, as far as I'm aware, and maybe I'm wrong. The access to the land ownership, not transfers. Not accessible, and neither for according to the Israeli law, I think that they have 30 years of they need to release the documents.
And the British archives did not release
you go there and they tell you that they give them back. In Kew Gardens, you go to Kew Gardens. You ask them about the because I mean you're telling them, well, I mean it was the British mandate. Where are the copies of the? They tell you that they are not there.
They're not there.
They are telling you that they are not there. Then, if they are keeping them at their log and they are not saying it, I don't know. But if you ask, they tell you that they are not there. They will send it back to Palestine when Israel. That's why. I mean, the Jordanian. I mean, they wanted to. I mean, there is some not literature, but there are some things related to this. The Jordanian. I think that they got the option to get some of the West Bank data, but they did not get it, or I don't know. I mean, it's not clear. Also, the PLO, they say that some of the documents that were lost when the Israelis they came to Lebanon in '82. There is something that you can follow, but suddenly, I mean, yeah, it's cut off. I mean, you cannot clearly see what happened and how. As far as I know, I mean, the UN is not releasing them, and those ones that they are, according to the British, that they were sending to Israel. I mean, they are not, of course, that they are not accessible.
The conspiracy goes on.
No, I mean, it's not it's not that it's a conspiracy. It's that, I mean, that there is a really sensitive thing for them. I mean, if they release them and they allow people that are living in Lebanon, in Jordan, or in Syria, or even in Palestine, to get access to the ownership of the land, I mean, they will open trials, or they will open things in the UN.
Crimes are open after 50 years.
30 years in Israel.
How many years?
30, but I mean, of course, I mean, like every country, I mean, has its own private clauses that they will keep under lock things. So they can extend it, and I mean, for a long time. It's in the case of Israel. I mean, they closed the 48 archives in the 70s, where scholars like Ilan Pape or other scholars, I mean, they deal with those things. When they started to deal also, not from the Palestinian side, that they were already saying that the Nakba happened, this was a preparable thing, but in the other, I mean, the Israeli academia also start seeing those things. But they still did not release all kind of sensitive documents for them. It's their own law, it's their own, I mean, and the UN, I mean, I emailed them, and of course, I mean, I knew the answer. I mean, they told me, no, it's really sensitive. Well, it's really sensitive, but I mean, being sensitive doesn't mean that we cannot need to grant access. And the British, they told me that I mean, personally, I don't know. I mean, if you have such big data and important data, that the British authorities will give back without a copy. If I were British, I mean, I wouldn't do it. I will keep a copy for me. They are saying that they don't have it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Just ask you, how can we access this map that you have?
It's gonna be in.
March?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the Center
Yeah.
for Arts and Humanities website, sometime at the end of February, early March, we upload all this information.
Yeah. So.
Is your presentation available as a PDF or something that I could send?
Yeah. I mean, I can. Sorry. I mean, yeah. I can give you the more updated, version that I don't have it here because I copied the old one that yesterday I was working with a friend on it. But yeah, I mean, I can.
Because my son works in GIS, and
Okay.
I would like to send it to him and read
Okay.
it myself. But the things that
The thing that I'm using, the data that I'm providing in this presentation is the data that I use it for the thesis. It's an old one. I redesigned the census in another way. So the data has changed.
it hasn't been published yet.
No, it haven't been published. I mean, there's one article going through in the States, and I'm working. I mean, hopefully, I will work on a book that I'm waiting for proposal for the answers. But this data that I'm providing in the presentation is it has been changed for the project because I mean I found like 3 villages that they could need to merge because I mean it's a long process. I mean I was working with 600 names of villages, and then you need to bring in, and then. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, kindly, Salman Ausita helped me on this task as well. I mean, as I said, I mean, it's something that is interdisciplinary. It's something that, I mean, I can handle it on my own, but I mean, I need a lot of things in terms of management of data and things. But I mean, I will be happy to.
So it's in process, but it's not ready yet.
No, I took the data from the thesis, and the data from the thesis, I mean, I found 2 villages that they needed to merge, so they will change slightly. The patterns are going to be the same, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, I will happily, yeah. And what is your son working on GIS related to Palestine or a more?
Palestinians from anthropology and oral history.
Okay. Okay. Is he in Lebanon or?
Here in Lebanon, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I would like to meet him in case, or if he wants to. I mean, I'm leaving in a week, so it's in a bit of a rush, yeah. Yeah, but I'm really happy. So yeah, no problem. Yeah. Yeah. No worries. Thank you.